All right, well, once again, happy Sunday. It's kind of an exciting day in our city, is it not? Happy AFC Championship game day. It's a big deal. You guys excited for the game today? Yeah, I know I am. I wore my, what we call our Midwest formals, the Texas tuxedo. Bringing my best today. I was just reminiscing. You know, it's crazy. 5 straight AFC Championship games. Like, it just doesn't seem like a big deal. I remember I was 10 years old watching the Buffalo Bills beat the Chiefs in 1993 with Joe Montana. I think he got hurt, and then our backup came in, and just feeling like so crushed. And so being a Chiefs fan for so long, it really is. We're living in the golden era of Chiefs football. And as a pastor, I really love that because that means less noon games. So we still get to have some more bodies in our church services, which is we're grateful for. But we're excited for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We are in week number 4 of our series entitled A Better Way. Week 4 of a 5-week series, subtitled With a Completely Appropriate Amount of Words. Andrew. Doesn't really matter. He's never preaching here again. A revolution against the travesty of normalcy. I'm going to be insecure about all of our sermon titles from now on. But the big idea of our series is this, and this should be great news, is that we don't have to live normal lives. Isn't that so encouraging? Like, we don't have to live a normal life. In my opinion, man, normal's broken. Normal is uninspiring. Normal is living with this like nagging, incessant feeling that there's got to be more than what I experience in this life. I just don't know what it is. Normal is believing that happiness and contentment and joy are elusive. A life of purpose and meaning are elusive. And I believe that in God's eyes, normalcy is a travesty. There has to be a better way. And we get to discover it in the living, active word of the Bible. In week number 1, we talked about a better way to love. That Jesus looked at his disciples and says, listen, this is going to be the standard by which we live. The way I have loved you, love one another. In week number 2, we talked about a better way to live. That we have to stop focusing on all like the peripheral, secondary issues. If we know Jesus, we know the way. If we know Jesus, we know the truth. If we know Jesus, we know everything we need to live a life fully alive. Last week, Andrew did an awesome job teaching us through a better way to follow. That Jesus and the Father are one. And Jesus makes this insane statement last week. He says that for those who believe in me, you will go on and accomplish greater things than I. What? Like, how in the world? We hear that and we think, how is that even possible? How could we even fathom that those of us in Christ could go on to do greater things than him? If you're curious, I'm so glad because buckle up, boys and girls. We get to answer that question this morning. So if you are here and you have your Bible, open up John chapter 14. And today we're going to look at a better way to obey. Starting in verse 15. And Jesus says this, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Right then and there, out of the gate, Jordan can come back, we can do communion, shut this thing down. Like, that is all we need today. Like, this is enough. Every problem in your life can be solved by this one very verse. Every issue, every difficulty. If Christians would live this out, hey, Jesus says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Game changer. When we first started the church, we used to do this thing called Growth Track. Any OGs around remember Growth Track? Yeah, God bless you guys. Growth Track, every time we would do it, I would talk about this very verse, John 14:15. And I would mention how this verse, in many ways, it's like what they call an ambiguous image, or maybe you've heard it referred to as a reversible figure. It's this thing, we all have seen them, where there's one image, but when you look at it, half the room sees one picture and half the room sees another. You know what I'm talking about? We have an example, and this is one of the more famous examples of a reversible figure. This one is called My Wife, My Mother-in-Law. So there's probably some deeper psychological issues here at play that I don't have the pay grade to unpack. But when you look at that, what is it that you see? Yes, and by the murmuring and we all see different things. For half of the group, maybe you see a young, attractive woman who's looking to the side. We're going to hope that's the wife. And for the other half of you, you see this old, weathered woman looking down, kind of the longer nose and chin, the mother-in-law. One image, two different interpretations. No offense to all the mother-in-laws in the room today. But this is the verse. John 14:15. It is one verse, two interpretations. In fact, I'll even go further. This one verse is a litmus test. Because I can tell by the way you read this verse whether you live under the law that leads to death or you live under the gospel of grace that leads to life. For some of you, when you look at John 14:15, here's what you see. Jesus says, oh, if you love me, okay, all right, we'll see. Prove it. Let's see your best. Let's see how moral. Let's see how good. Let's see how much you can do for me. It's a love that has to be earned, an affection that has to be earned. But for others of you, when you look at John 14:15, here's what you read. Jesus saying, hey, if you love me, kind of like what we talked about in week 2, it's all good. If you love me, then you will keep my commandments. That if you keep loving me, then it's only a matter of time that obedience will follow. And those of us, hopefully the majority of our church, this is our interpretation. This is the understanding. This is this gospel of grace that Jesus came to the world to establish. It's so important that true love always manifests in willing obedience to God. And what that means is that we cannot separate our love for God and our obedience to God. See, for some of us, we have a tendency to view obedience through this kind of pseudo-legalistic lens, and we view love through an emotional lens. And we like to keep them in separate compartments, but they are in fact one and the same. They are inextricable, impossible to separate. So when we disobey God, it wasn't a failure of the will, it wasn't a failure of strength, it was actually a failure of love. That the source of a Christian's obedience, it's not self-discipline, it's not pride. It's the love that we have for God. It's love that leads us to a life of holiness and obedience. Jesus said that if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. So a lot to unpack here. Jesus looks at the disciples and he says, okay, I'm going to go to God and I'm going to ask him to send you a what? What's the word he uses? A helper. The Greek word here is the word paraclete. And we've got many different possible interpretations of paraclete. We see helper here. You've probably heard comforter. Probably the best we have in the English language is this idea of an advocate or a counselor. So Jesus is telling the disciples that he's going to go to the Father, and the Father is going to send them this advocate, this counselor, that will do the things an advocate counselor would do. Things like correct faulty thinking, direct them in their lives, convict the world of sin, and ultimately, this advocate will plead their case to the Father. Does that sound awfully familiar to someone else that we know? correct lies, direct their lives, convict the world of sin, and then advocate on our behalf to God our Father. It's almost as if I've read that before somewhere else. 1 Timothy 2:5, for there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Jesus Christ. 1 John 2:1, my dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin, but anyone who does sin, we have a, what's the word there? Advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. Guys, do you see what Jesus is doing here? When he says in verse 16, I will ask the Father and he will give you another helper to be with you forever. Notice how he doesn't say, I'll ask the Father and give you a helper. What does he say? What's the word there? I'll give you a what? Another helper. It's so subtle. It's so easy to miss. But Jesus is saying, I'm going to send you someone, and he's not going to be random. He's not going to be completely polar opposite and different from everything you experience. I'm going to send you someone like me. He'll be like me. Just as I helped, just as I comforted, just as I advocated, now I send you another helper, another advocate on your behalf. It's a remarkable reality. And it's this idea that we can have confidence in the deity of this Trinitarian doctrine, because the same exact word used to describe Jesus in 1 John 2:1 is the word that Jesus uses to describe the Holy Spirit in verse 16. This paraclete, I'm sending you this advocate, another helper. And he'll change everything. And the craziest part is that that's not even like the best part of the verse. The best part is the last word. He says, I will send him and he will be with you forever. Forever. We're all thinking it. Just great movie. Forever. It's a long time. It's this seismic shift that we see, a move from the Old Testament to the New. In the Old Testament, there were moments of the Spirit. There were glimpses of the Spirit. There were these instances of the Spirit's indwelling, but they were temporary. They were time-stamped. But now we're told that this new helper will be with us forever. That he will never leave, and he will accompany us to the end of time. It's remarkable. Verse 17. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive because it neither sees him nor knows him, you know him, for he, what's the word there? Oh, I love that word. For he dwells with you and will be in you. See, when we put our faith in Jesus, when we count the cost of discipleship, and we pick up our cross and we begin to follow him, we're told that something amazing happens. That the Spirit of what? Truth begins to dwell inside of us. And when that happens, it was like that week where I put the mullet wig on. You guys remember that? Some of you are like, gosh, we picked a terrible week to skip church. So that happened. And we shared this. It was totally normal. I had a mullet wig on. We played a Roddy Piper clip. Totally normal Sunday. But we referenced that movie, He Lives, where he puts those glasses on and he sees the world for what it really is. This is what happens when the Spirit of truth begins to dwell in you. That when truth dwells in you, you now can see lies. And this should be really clarifying and helpful for some of us, because for you, you're probably baffled at times. You're like, why is it that these people that I know and love, my unbelieving friends, like they don't see the reasons why they feel so unfulfilled? Why is it that my unbelieving family and my unbelieving coworkers, it's as if they're blind to the fact that they're just medicating and anesthetizing and numbing themselves from the pain? Don't they see that everything they really desire is found in Jesus? And the answer to that is no. Because when the Spirit of truth dwells in you, you begin to see everything different. That the lost world out there, they don't even understand why they want the things that they want. But when the Spirit of truth takes residence, you do. The world, they give their lives to pursuing sex, but when the Spirit indwells, you see it's actually just a desire for intimacy that's found in Christ. They give their lives to pursue power and greatness, but you understand that it's just this imago Dei, that in this God design, we want these things, but they're actually this desire for influence and to expand the kingdom in the world. That we want stuff, but it's actually Jesus who provides freedom through contentment. When the Spirit of truth takes residence, we see everything different. Our entire worldview is shifted and it changed. And we're told that this Spirit dwells inside of us. When you look at the Greek for that word dwell, what it literally means is, and I have to enunciate this really intentionally, it means that he pitches his tent. I say that because there is a viral video of a pastor who mispronounces this phrase. Don't watch it in front of your kids, but it's really funny. So that's your gift this afternoon. It happens. So don't talk for a living. There's some doozies I've had myself. But he pitches his tent. I've seen the video too many times. He pitches his tent and he takes up residence. And once again, it's this shared characteristic between the Trinity, the God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God the Father pitches his tent in the earth. And we see it through him dwelling in the tabernacle in the Old Testament. Jesus pitches his tent when he takes through the incarnation and he lives among us. And now it just gets greater and greater because now the Spirit of truth, this advocate, this helper, pitches his tent not just with us, but in us. That he takes up residence and he dwells in his people. And Jesus says this to the disciples: I will not leave you as orphans, but I will come to you. He's referring to the resurrection. Yet a little while, and the world will see me no more, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. So keep in mind here, Jesus has just told the disciples like a few chapters early, like, hey, I'm leaving on a jet plane. Like, I'm out. I'm leaving. And they're freaking out. Because they believe that once Jesus goes, like their discipleship program is over. But what Jesus is trying to say is, guys, it's not over. This is just the beginning. Like, because I leave, you won't have less, you'll have more. You won't have less help, you'll have more help. I'm not going to leave you as orphans, he says. Because for many orphans, their parents are dead, but the Spirit of truth will reveal to you that I am very much alive. Orphans have no one, but they will have the Spirit that will dwell in them. Orphans have no provider, but yet the Spirit will provide all things. Orphans, they're left without a parent, instructor, a mentor, but the Spirit will guide them into all truth. Orphans have oftentimes no one to advocate for their behalf, but now this advocate will come and will fight for them. That it's not less, Jesus is saying, it's more, and for their benefit. Verse 20, Jesus says, in that day, and he's referring to like the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit would fall and fill believers. In that day, you will know that I am in the Father and you in me, and I in you. Get this. Whoever has my commandments and keeps them, it's he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him. And what's that word? I will manifest myself to him. Meaning that for some of us, if we're honest, God feels distant at best and at worst, like nowhere to be found. That we've lost the desire to come to church. We've lost the desire to pick up the Word of God, to pray. We can't remember the last time we've just gotten lost in a time of worship or seeking His presence. And everything about our faith, it just feels like we're like trudging through the mud, and everything is way harder than it should be or it was at one point. And it's all just going through the motions. And it feels empty and it feels meaningless. And for those of you who would say, like, yes, like that's me, that is the accurate description of my current reality, Jesus is reminding us that when we keep the Father's commandments, that when we live lives of obedience, it's then that we experience the goodness and the presence and the power of God in our lives. Then we experience Jesus manifest in our lives. Can I be brutally honest this morning? Does your faith feel dull? Does your faith feel lifeless? Could it be because you are living a lifestyle of active sin? Do you feel like God is far away? Do you feel like you can't remember the last time you sensed God's presence in your life? Could it be because you live a life of disobedience? Can we just call a duck sometimes, church? Can we be honest? For some of us, we're like, Jesus, where are you? And I think, could it be that he's like, bro, I'm like right here. Where are you? That he's not in the business of hiding. That you will seek me and you will find me, but you have to seek me with all of your heart. And yet for some of us, our heart is consumed in sin. Listen, here's the deal. We can have intimacy with Jesus or live a lifestyle of sin, but you can't have both. And this is one of those where the rubber meets the road moments, because I know we all say we want intimacy with Jesus, but behaviorally, what do we really want? The desire of Jesus is to manifest himself through the Spirit in our lives, but he will only manifest in those who keep the commandments of the Father. Verse 22. Then Judas, not Iscariot, said to him. Can we stop here for a moment? So, we just had some heaviness, just had some heavy things, some things we need to process. So can we just take a quick commercial break? And can we all just appreciate together how much it would suck to be this guy? Can we do that? Like how much it would stink to be like the Judas, the other Judas, the not Iscariot Judas. Like this guy was just minding his own business. Life was good. It was fine. The biggest inconvenience that he ever faced was when someone said, "Hey, Judas," and then two dudes turned around and said what? Like that was as bad as it got for him. And then like Judas Iscariot goes off and does the worst thing imaginable. It would be like the equivalent of me turning on the national news and reading the headline, Florida man, Craig Cackley, convicted in string of puppy murders. You're like, oh my goodness. And now every time someone says my name, you say my name, it's mentioned public, it's like Craig, not the puppy murderer, Craig. The other Craig. No, he's indifferent towards puppies. Just not him. The other one. So it's like, so much so that John's like, I have to parenthetically establish this is not that guy. Sorry. Brief comic relief there. So Judas, not the traitor. Not him. He says, and he actually asks a great question. I love this question that he asks. He says, Lord, how is it that you will manifest yourself to us and not to the world? And perhaps this is the question that some of us are asking this morning. Like, Lord, how are you going to show yourself to me? Like, how am I going to find you? How will you reveal yourself to me? It's interesting, Liam and I were just talking about this very thing this week. How are you going to show up in my life? And Jesus answered in verse 23, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him. And we will come to him and make our home with him. Whoever does not love me does not keep my words, and the word that you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. Jesus concludes this thought by saying, every utterance, every word, every syllable, every phrase you have heard me speak, they're not my words, they're the words of the Father speaking through me. And Jesus, he goes on and he answers this deeply human question that Judas presents. Like, Lord, what do we do when we feel like you're nowhere to be found? What do we do when we feel like you're distant and I'm alone and my heart feels cold and I show up to church and it's just not what it used to be? Or I feel like you're just so far off. Like, what do we do? Because if we're honest, the natural tendency for most of us is to go back to what we've already and always known, which is the law. It's to go back to the easiest thing. It's to go back to the path of least resistance, which is to follow the rules. Because this is what we've been taught our entire lives, is it not? That for those who don't follow the rules, they're bad. So I need to follow the rules and then I'll be good. So if I find myself in a place that's bad, I'll start following more rules, then my life will turn. So we just click into the law. We click into rule following. We click into obedience mode. And once again, we're now presented with the ambiguous image of the wife and the mother-in-law. Well, which will we choose? And so we start doing all the right things. But here's the problem. It never works. And then we become more angry and more frustrated. Well, God, you felt distant to me, but now I'm doing all the stuff. I committed 2023. I'm going to go back to church, and now I'm here. Don't feel anything. Doesn't seem any different. I'm going to read my word, and I start it, and it's not clicking. Maybe this was not meant to be. And what Jesus is showing us, stop focusing on the rules. Stop focusing on obedience. For those of us who once followed Christ and we feel like the zeal and the passion of our faith has left, what Jesus is saying, return back to your first love. Return back to me. I don't need you to perform for me. I don't need us to be the dancing gesture. I don't need you to do all these things. I just want you. And I just want you to want me. So what would it look like to just scale everything back, to reduce our faith back to what it once was for some of us in that moment? What does it look like for me to just want Jesus and know that Jesus just wants me? Not the me when I finally act the way I know I should. Not the me when I finally get it together. Not the me when I finally get out of debt or I finally work through my wounds and my trauma. What does it look like to return back to the place where all I want is Jesus and Jesus just wants me? Because there, in the place of love, in the place of pure, unadulterated love, that's the place where faith is reignited. That's the place where the spark is formed. Before the complexity, before it became about all of these other things, Jesus is telling you, stop trying to earn your way back to me. When you focus on obedience, you never get loved. You know that? As a parent, if that's the hill you're going to die on, we're going to have the best behaved kids in the world. You know what? You know what the saddest thing is? You might actually pull it off. But when you focus on obedience, you never get love. You're going to have the best behaved kids who are counting the days till they turn 18 and you're not going to see them anymore. When you focus on obedience, you never get love. But when you focus on love, obedience is always unlocked. When you focus on love, when we return back to the heart, this posture of, why would I not want to serve the God that I love? Why would I not want everything that God has for me? Why would I not want to do the things that pleases the heart of my Father? And then magically, the presence of Jesus through the Spirit begins to manifest once again in my life. It's incredible how it happens. God's not impressed by your rule following. He wants your heart. How can you? I don't know if I know how to answer this question for you. But how can you fall more in love with Jesus? Because I have a feeling that there are hundreds of different answers for each of us in here. How can I fall more in love with Jesus? Go all in there. Keep focusing there and watch what happens as these things that you've struggled with just begin to unlock over time. Watch what happens to the shame. You can't feel shame and actively pursue love for Jesus at the same time. They can't coexist because the love of Jesus decimates shame. It decimates guilt. It cleanses and it purifies and it unlocks and it sets us free. You can have a cart and you can have a horse. Both matter, but the order is very important. This is what Jesus is saying. If you love me, you're going to obey my commands. Stop with the command emphasis. I know we have been programmed. We need to deprogram some things and return back to the heart. Pursue the Father. Realize that because the Spirit of truth dwells in us, we have everything we need to do everything He's called us to do. But none of it is possible without love. That is the better way to obey. Father, right now, as we just create some space, would you speak to us, each and every one of us individually, every person here at the City House, every person watching online? How do we fall more in love with you? How do we return back to that first love? For some, maybe it's just the striving needs to cease. For others, we just simply don't give you time or any of our mental energy. For some, we've been so locked into this law-based, law-oriented life because it's clean, it's neat, and love is messy. And I think for some of us, you're just kind of luring us into the mess. For some of us, Lord, the step of love is to confess some things in our lives. For some, God, the desire is even there. We want to love you, but we want to love our sin more, if we're honest. And I pray that we would love more passionately pursuing you than we would this lifestyle of sin. So we confess those things. We lay those things down at your feet. Would you teach us a better way to obey? We can't earn something that's just freely given and is perfect and pure and available. Father, there's so many insecurities, so many lies of the enemy. We just struggle, for many of us at times, to believe that you see us for who we really are and you still love us. That's when we need the Spirit of truth in our life. Because it is true that we are fully seen, fully loved, fully known. That we can be transparent and vulnerable in your eyes. But we need your help, Lord. Be with us. In Jesus' name, amen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take communion together, and I want to share with you a passage. I've never shared this before that coincides with communion. It's in 1 Corinthians 11, and Paul, he's saying to the Corinthian Christians, he says, "Therefore, whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty." And there's been a lot of different speculation as to what exactly Paul means here by this. Like, what does it mean to take communion in an unworthy manner, to be guilty? Some believe that an unworthy manner is when an unbeliever takes communion. Others believe that unworthy manner is that the Corinthians were excluding some from the table. And so this worthy manner is to invite all into the table. Some believe that this unworthy manner is to take communion while actively participating in sin. And there's probably some truth in all those. But the thing I want us to understand more than any of it is that the purpose behind why Paul wrote this verse wasn't to exclude people from the table. That wasn't the goal. The goal was it was never that the good people get to come take communion and the bad people don't get to. No. The goal was, I need to search my own heart. I need to confess my own sin before I take communion. Because the heart of my God is always that I'm at the table. That there's always a seat reserved for me. And so that's what I want to ask us to do before, Jordan's going to lead us in a song here in a moment, before we take communion together. Lord, search me. Know my heart. God, see my thoughts, any anxious way in me. Lord, where are those areas in my life that I need to confess, the things I need to repent of, that I need to turn away from before I take communion this morning. I want to do so, God, in a way that's worthy to you. And so let's keep that in mind this morning as we take communion together.